also have a cold, so now I get to sound stuffy again.
And also, there's something, your audio sounds like your mic is not great this week.
Well, you're just hearing me through my phone.
I'm just busting your chops.
Okay.
Because you packed up your good mic and you put it at the bottom of the box marked delicate glass. You put all of your, like, grandma's crystal on top of it.
All right, so let's explain for our listeners. So it's mid-December. It's been a couple months since we recorded. Here's what happened. Because we got right back on the saddle, then fell right back off it. I moved out of my office, packed up all my gear because I was told I'd be in my new office within 10 days. It is now 2 months later. I'm still not in that office. So all my gear is buried in my garage. Now, I could have sorted through the garage to find my mic, or we could do what we're doing now, which is I'm recording with a backup mic. So if it sounds weird, it's because I'm using this little Zoom recorder and not a proper mic. But concurrent with this office relocation, which is still in process, I dove in to a film project and was prepping all of November and just finished 2 weeks of shooting. We actually have 3 more days in January. So compounding the office relocation was a all-consuming film shoot. But we always said this was a value add for ourselves, and we're working guys. So if there's a month or two where we're just buried in work or life, we're not going to sweat it.
Yeah, so get off our backs.
We're just two friends with a podcast.
Yeah.
We should name the podcast that.
That's dumb.
I'm a filmmaker.
I'm a scientist.
And we're two friends who've made movies together.
And launched a company together.
And we lost our money.
And our identity.
But we are finding ourselves again.
And this is our podcast.
This is it.
Welcome.
In this episode, we chat, we catch up. It's been a while since we've talked. And in the middle of my film shoot, I give a data dump. I give a dump to Justin on how it's been going.
He does dump on stuff.
So we talk a lot about my film shoot that I'm in the middle of. It's a long, in-depth kind of conversation in real time on a small indie film as it's getting made, how it came to be, how it's going.
Dig in.
So strap in, Omicron heads.
Strap on.
And enjoy the first episode of the new year on Two Friends with a Podcast. Yeah, so we just wrapped 9 days of a 12-day shoot because we're basically off for 2.5, 3 weeks. We got through it. We still got 3 more days. I mean, I remember I spent most of November just in a state of anxiety, not quite believing the film would happen.
Because of what?
Because of PTSD from other projects not happening. But
That's what, I wasn't sure if it was that or something specific.
Well, it was galvanized by the fact that we are in a pandemic and there are real things that I cannot control that could shut us down. So it wasn't just a disbelief that a car wreck's going to kill one of my actors. I mean, those sort of really unrealistic things come in your mind. Oh, there's going to be some way that this thing is going to be shut down. All of those sort of swirl around when you have PTSD from other projects that you pour so much time, sweat, money into, and then they don't happen. But adding to the fact that there is a pandemic that is shutting things down, I spent all of November just in a state of sheer anxiety. I'm pushing this through. I actually remember it was Thanksgiving week. The anxiety and stress sort of peaked, and I was in a rough spot. I was second guessing everything. I was doubting myself. I was like, you push this through too quick. You're not ready. This is not going to work out. Why can't you just be patient? Why do you always have to do this? Just, one of those low places. And the Saturday after Thanksgiving, I think I just went out with some friends and the stress kind of broke. It's just sort of stress kind of grows and grows until it peaks, and then it just sort of fades away. And then I was fine. And we started shooting the next week. And, it's been amazing. it's all come together for a small film that's very under-resourced, low budget, small crew. We've had no real hiccups. And you and I have been involved in projects with major hiccups, major catastrophes.
Yeah.
Any given project usually will have fires to put out or something that really catastrophic can happen. For this, it's like normal stresses, little things here and there, but nothing major. Now, knock on wood, we still have 3 days left, but it's been going so well. We've made every day. And on top of that, what we're capturing is pretty awesome, pretty special. So
yeah, I mean, the dailies that you sent me looked amazing.
Well, I got to send you week 2. I just finished week 2 dailies yesterday, and yeah, it's been awesome. Cast and crew have been incredible, and I'm excited to get 3 more days of shooting in January and then dive into the edit. I still should have a pretty rough assembly by the beginning of February, and hopefully a decent rough cut by the end of February, so that we can start submitting to, early festivals or targeting festivals with a rough cut as we continue the project.
You'll submit to spring festivals and not wait. I mean, I guess it does feel like it would be crazy to wait until next fall.
Well, we would have missed all the spring festivals. A lot of those, the deadlines are already passed. We'd be looking at summer or fall festivals. Like basically Toronto is sort of the last one in September. That there's obviously many festivals after Toronto, but as far as like a target premiere festival that we can sell the film out of, that sort of feels like the target. There's Cannes in May, but who knows about Cannes? I think there's some summer European festivals. So yeah, summer or September would be sort of the goal. But those deadlines will be in the spring. So we will have to submit rough cuts and have our, my agents lobbying them, other producers, talking to people they know at those festivals. Hey, check out our film. It's in rough, it's a rough cut. But based on the strength of the dailies, or hopefully this rough cut, it'll be something that could really interest people.
So what do you have left? You said you have 3 days, and I know, anybody who's listening might not be, I mean, they're most certainly not familiar with the script, but I'm curious in the context of the script, what's left?
Not quite remembering how vague or specific I've gotten in past episodes. I will say that this is a small feature film, music film. So it's ultra low budget, which is the SAG tier for anything under $300,000. So that is our tier. And it's a film that I've had the idea vaguely for a couple years, but it really only started this summer when the idea turned into an actual outline. And then once it was clear I wasn't going to make All the Names We Buried, I pushed that, and I actually focused time in writing out an outline, then became a script. That was just like in August and September. So this project really began then, because the decision was, look, I've already put too much time, sweat, blood into All the Names We Buried. I don't want to, if I can't make the $1 million or $2 million version of that film, I don't want to try to make it for a few $100,000. Because at one time I was going to make that for $350,000. I don't want to do that anymore. I've moved past that. I've just put too much in, and there's a point where it's like, if I'm going to make a film that small, it's almost better to just come up with something new that you designed to be made that small.
Right.
Because you can actually make something that's, you can actually make something for that budget level that you've designed to be that way. So it's actually going to, come together a lot easier. But also you're excited about something new and fresh, as opposed to something you've been carrying around for 4 years that now you resent because you thought you were going to make it bigger and you're just making it smaller. So it's almost good to just push that thing off and just make a new thing. And as I've talked to like our other producer friends like Noah and Chad, they've really echoed that. And they're just like, yeah, that's the right strategy, where it's like, you've got a big film and a small film. Don't try to make two versions. Don't try to plan two versions of the same film. Just have a different film. So this project came together really quickly. It's about a musician chasing the dream. And I knew I was going to cast my musician friends here locally, musicians who were acting for the first time. Like, that was my whole idea. I was going to fill it with a lot of great original music. I was going to set it during Christmas, so it's going to have sort of a Christmas vibe, but something very still art house, still indie, kind of, carrying the weight of the melancholy that comes with Christmas. And there's been a few indie films that have sort of been set at Christmas that I really like, but there's barely any. All of the Christmas films are only sort of relegated to the kind of the Hallmark or the family friendly sort of genre. So I think there's a place in the market for something a little more serious, a little more art house that is still Christmas set.
Very family non-family friendly, I would call this film.
I mean, it won't be rated R by any means, but it certainly won't be a kid movie.
Oh yeah,
there's a lot of scenes in bars. There's a lot of drinking. It's not Bad Santa by any means, but it's I think there's a huge audience for it.
Joking aside, it is heavier material while not being dark. I wouldn't call it dark. It is, it's more, I feel like it fits in more with the heaviness of kind of, I think, what most adults are feeling these days.
Absolutely. And it's
a bit of existential crisis.
Yep. And it's about an artist chasing the dream. And the artist is a musician, but he's very much a proxy for me as a filmmaker. Someone who's, I turned 40 last month, and you can't help but wrestle with the tensions of, I'm not where I thought I'd be. What's the dream I'm chasing? When is it going to happen for me? And as I think a lot of adults feel this way, but certainly artists who are pursuing their art full time, we wrestle with these tensions all the time. And it really, it's hard for us to come to a place of peace and emotional health while pursuing the dream. And so it's a story about that the hope, but the heaviness of hope, and really redefining success. And what does it mean to be successful? What does it mean to have a really binary view of what the dream is? Why can't I be at peace with where I am? So all of that is the thematic of the story and what our character is going through. And it's a very simple story. He's basically just pursuing the dream over a December month. And there's a ton of music. There's a lot of original music. It's all performed live on camera, and the music's really good and exciting. And so, once is the obvious reference point for other films. The great Irish film that I think they made for $100,000 on the streets of Dublin. Very simple story, very lo-fi aesthetic, amazing music. So that's kind of what we're going after. And that's what I'm hoping we're capturing. So we've just wrapped 9 days of that. The 3 more days we have are basically the big Irish pub day. So our character, he's pursuing music full time, but he also has a job bartending at an Irish pub. And there's a lot of scenes set in the Irish pub. So we have 2 full days that we're closing down a pub, and we've got to film all of those. So they're pretty heavy days. So I'm glad there was one version of the schedule where those 2 days were first. And then I was like, this is suicide. Like, thank God we punted those. We ended up punting them to the end of this week, but then we couldn't get crew for this week because everyone's leaving. So we're like, let's just punt those to January. And that made everybody feel better. And then our final day is the 31st, 2 weeks after that, which is so in the script, Stephen performs at his cousin's show. John Mark McMillan plays his cousin. Now, John Mark and Stephen went on tour, and the goal originally was to try to capture the scene actually on tour. We decided that was too much of a logistical nightmare to try to pull off. So we were like, let's just plan a mock show where we can literally just rent out a venue and can, have a fake audience. And we just perform the 2 songs that are going to be in the film. So that's the 31st. So we'll actually rent out a really beautiful venue uptown Charlotte.
Wait, what What is it that I saw?
Yeah, Dallas. So we went to Dallas still and recorded John Mark's show, but we basically saw it as a dry run. We were like, hey, let's film this because this will end up in the film, like in the end montage, but this won't be the big midpoint performance because we were going to have to get multiple cameras. Like we had one shot to get it. And thank God we did because a downpour literally cut the show short. And Steven's song that he was going to perform got thrown, like wasn't able to do it. So basically I was like, thank God. So we got amazing stuff in Dallas.
Funny. We literally talked about that. We talked about that exact eventuality.
Yeah.
Like what if it starts raining during the show? That's funny. But the stuff that I was looking at, it looked like an indoor venue.
Yeah, that was outside.
That was outside.
The stage is covered. The stage is covered. And if you see some of the shots before, you could see rain. We got some amazing shots as the rain started coming. And if the rain continued with that pitter patter, they would have continued the show. But I mean, it was like sideways downpour. It ruined gear. Like the bassist lost his amp because it just got too wet. I mean, it was a downpour. And the fans thankfully got their money's worth because John Mark just went inside at the bar, which has like a little stage, and he just finished the set acoustic style. And all the fans kind of poured into there. So it was a real memorable, fun night. But it was basically like if that was our scene for the film, it would have been a complete fail. But
so that was just kind of like a bonus.
It was just a bonus. It was just me and Chris and Kevin, and I was like, if we get good footage, I know where it can end up in the film. Like it can end up in a different place of the film. So it ended up being really a worthwhile trip.
And so Steven is Gabe, right?
Steven Williams.
And Steven Williams, and he's an actual musician. Like that's his, he's not an actor. He's a musician who is acting.
So Steven Williams plays music under the name Jude Moses. He's released. He's still up and coming. He kind of takes his time. I mean, he's about to release his second full length album, and but basically full time. He basically does hourly gigs, a lot of manual blue collar labor, so that he can do music full time. John Mark, who is a full-time recording artist and tours, Steven's in his band. So whenever John Mark is on the road...
Friend of the show, John Mark McMillan.
Exactly, friend of the show. Whenever John Mark's touring, Steven's in his band. And whenever John Mark's not touring, Steven's, just...
grinding.
Doing honest work, making his own music, and, doing construction or laying tile. But Steven has never acted before. And and I remember when I came up with the idea, I was sort of thinking like, this will work if I have a really unique lead who can do this. And the goal was always to find a musician who can act. I wasn't trying to find an actor who could also do music. I wanted the authenticity, but I also wanted this sort of just the purity of someone is not an actor. And if I thought if they could be natural on camera, then that's all I needed, because I wasn't really asking them to act too much. It was just kind of like, hey,
be yourself,
be a version of yourself. Which is funny because Gabe is very much closer to me than he is to Steven. Steven's much more of a laid back guy who just lets life happen to him and is at peace with where he is and he wants to pursue music, but he doesn't have the desperation that I do for like trying to make it and that Gabe has. But I remember seeing Steven. I've known Steven a long time, and we're a part of the same extended family. And I just remember I just kind of saw him play one day. He was just playing on a mic, and I was like, oh yeah, man, I've always loved Steven's voice. It's a very unique, beautiful voice. He's got incredible range. He's got this amazing tenor and falsetto, but he can go really low. And he's just a laid-back country boy. He's got tattoos, got this southern drawl. He's just a very unique guy, a very unconventional leading man. And I was like, he'd be perfect. And I approached him. I was like, hey, man, have you ever acted before? He's like, no. I was like, have you ever wanted to act? He's like, no. And I was like, cool. I was like, I might be, and this was before the film was happening. I was like, I might be doing a little music film project later in the year if it comes together. I'd love to talk to you about being involved. And that was the extent of what I said to him. He said, okay. And then I gave another month to making all the names happen when I officially pushed it. And I was like, all right, I'm going to make this film. Basically, I had to then ask him to be the lead. And it was sort of a 1-2 punch of Stephen and John Mark McMillan. So John Mark McMillan is Stephen's brother-in-law. And John Mark's a very successful artist. We all know him because he's been on the show before. But I wanted John Mark to play the character's cousin and have a meaningful supporting role. And I knew it would only work if both of them did it. And I knew if one of them didn't do it, the other wasn't going to do it. And if one of them wasn't going to do it, I wasn't sure. Like, I kind of wrote it for them. So if it wasn't going to be John Mark and Stephen, I was going to have to rethink the characters. So I kind of had to approach them both delicately. And they both were very apprehensive at first. John Mark was almost a no at first, just because he had never acted before. It was outside of his comfort zone. And understandably, you don't just want to dive into something that's outside of your comfort zone. But they both knew me. They had trust in me. So John Mark's like, if I do this, it's because of you. It's because I trust you and believe in you. And I took Stephen out, and I was basically like, I want to make a feature film and I want you to be the lead. and kind of like over 2 hours, tried to sell him on the whole thing. And by the end of the night, he was like, he was still apprehensive, but he was inclined to the idea. He was excited for the adventure. He was game to try it if John Mark would do it. And so I basically kind of had to work them over a few weeks. And we basically said, okay, let's just have a screen test. Let's just you, me, the three of us get together, have some whiskey and read some of the scenes. I'll film it with a little DSLR. And if that feels like it's going to work, then we'll all move forward. Cause I was like, if you guys suck or, are completely stiff on camera, then I don't want you and you don't want to do it. So we were kind of all, inclined towards
testing the waters. And
then we did the screen test and we all had a blast. Like it was instantly clear that when I rolled camera and I was like, all right, do this scene where you guys just have a conversation talking about the tour and you invite him to play on your thing. They just settled right into it. And they realized after, they're like, oh, this is easy because these are all conversations we've had before. And it was like they realized that they didn't really have to act if it's a world they knew. And this was a world they knew. So they loved it. I loved it. I had no doubt that they could be natural on camera, provided I, gave them the right sort of environment and dialogue that was familiar to them. And after that sort of test screen, we were all in. And to their credit, they've trusted me every step of the way. And they have exceeded my expectations. I mean, Stephen is incredible. He has done some beautiful natural acting that I told him, I was like, bro, you cannot teach what you're doing. And I was like, it may feel easy to you, but this is not easy what you're doing. And I think it's just because, if you're not an actor, you have no of the pretenses of like training or what I'm supposed to do. And Stephen was always asking the right questions. He'd read us. He's like, I don't understand what this means. I don't understand why I'd be saying this. And which is, you'd be surprised how many actors don't actually analyze their script and ask the director, like, why is he saying this? What does it mean? And so he was keeping me honest with the dialogue. And if I couldn't really defend it or argue it, we would change it. Because as long as Stephen was understanding what the character was saying, he could just speak and say it, and it would come across so real and natural. And Emily Althouse, who plays his wife, they had a beautiful chemistry from day one. I mean, I lucked out getting the introduction to her from Noah Lang because she is just incredible. Their scenes together are just magic.
Yeah, she was great. I mean, I didn't actually, the dailies that you sent me was mostly just like
there's no dialogue.
There's no dialogue, but it was like set to music, and I could see the rapport between the two of them, like that scene in the car.
So clear.
I don't know what they're saying, but I could see her reactions and they just felt honest. And, like to the point that like, I was like, wait, are they
right
in a relationship, like for real, like outside of the thing? And I had to look up and make sure that I was, that I knew who the actress was. Cause I thought I did. I recognized her. I mean, from a couple places. She's in The Strange Ones and, Orange is the New Black. Also, I randomly saw her in this show that I started watching recently called The Magicians. She's in like 2 episodes and I was like, hey, that's Emily
Nice.
Outhouse. But yeah, she did great. And then same thing with Steven, just seeing his face and kind of like the way he's talking, and when he's talking to the baby, it felt. I mean, that was the bit of dialogue that was in there. Was him interacting with the baby, and the baby did it. Man, the baby did a great job.
The baby steals the show. Golly! So the baby, the characters, they have like a 6-month-old baby, and one of our production designers, Christina Hussey, she had a newborn. So basically, I was like, "Hey, Christina, can we use your baby as our baby?" And thank God that baby Julian was about the calmest, just loveliest baby. It was just a dream. Like, it was, he was in like 4 or 5 days of shooting. And like to the point where, if Julian wasn't, he wasn't going to be there for a few hours, but Christina's there, set dressing and doing her production design thing. The baby's young enough where he just sleeps and nurses all day. So the baby would be there on set, like in the pack and play or just around, just because his mom was there. And he was such a quiet baby that he wasn't going to disrupt anything. And having a infant on your set was the most calming presence. I was like, forget filming a baby. Like there should be a set baby at every set, because it just, everyone's quieter, they're calm, and just a baby's a beautiful creature. And it was just always smiling, always happy. He steals the show. It was incredible. But just closing the loop on Steven, I mean, I can't wait to introduce the indie world to him. I mean, the music world is discovering him. I mean, he's certainly got fans and he's, forging his own path there. But I'm just excited to introduce him to the indie world, because he's, and everyone who's been around him is just like, man, what a great find. What a great unconventional lead actor. Cause he's got unconventional good looks. He's got this really incredible voice. His Southern accent is just a really unique sort of take on the character. And he's got his natural humor is just really fun and delightful. And everyone's really been sort of taken with him, which just has validated my initial instincts. And I'm just really excited to kind of pull it all together. And then, surround him with other amazing musicians. So Steven obviously has the lion's share of songs, but there's 4 or 5 other incredible musicians who get screen time, who sing songs. So it's like this soundtrack's going to be this amazing ensemble of just really great songs and musicians. And it's going to work. The film will work because the music works, and the music's really working.
The music was just great. Even just that little acoustic thing he was playing for the baby again. I mean, I know it sounded great, very emotional. I mean, was that him singing the Old Lang Syne? Yeah. Was that him singing that? Or
yeah,
it was. Okay. So, yeah, that was beautiful.
Yeah. So like the music, the vision for the music is all performed live on camera. So a lot of it will sound like we're tracking it and recording it with really studio quality mics, but we're not doing it in a studio. So he plays a lullaby and a ukulele for his baby.
Oh, so he's playing it live. That's not like, a lot of times you'll play it live, but then you'll dub it with a studio recording.
Right.
But
We're
that's
not
not
doing
the case
that
here.
No. Because
that's awesome.
All of that just rings false for me. And I want it all to feel live and real. So we are recording it as it's happening, and it will be mixed relative to its environment. Now, in the script, he goes to a studio and records a studio song, and that will be the one song that gets a studio treatment because that's the scene. He's recording it in a studio. But even what we're seeing will still be kind of the raw studio take. But most of the film, like there's a bunch of scenes in a bar where he's playing it in like the pub corner. Those will feel loud and roomy like a bar. There's we had a few other songs in a different bar scene, like set in Nashville, that we shot here in town. And those will have that raw live bar sound. There's a bunch of acoustic stuff in his house that will feel, like raw acoustic songs in the house, because it not just would a polished sound, it wouldn't look right. Like you're hearing something that's different from the environment. It'll just feel false if it sounds too polished. But it's just, it betrays the whole aesthetic and the whole vibe of what, it would really be. Don't go anywhere. Our conversation continues after these messages. And by messages, we mean a short musical interlude.
So, did you have like fully scripted scenes, or was some of it sort of like like open to interpretation of the actors? Like what, or I don't know if improv is the right word, but where it's sort of like, this is the scene and these are the anchors, but kind of have the conversation naturally. Was that part of this at all? Or
that was definitely part of the idea and the vision. And I said that in the script. I wrote out every scene. I wrote out all the dialogue, but I said, we're going to embrace a measure of improv, because I thought that would be the best way to get some of these first time actors out of their heads, not relying on the dialogue. In actuality, it's proven much less to be an improv sort of shoot than I originally thought, and maybe even originally wanted. And part of this is, we put ourselves under really big constraints for how many scenes we kind of had to get through in a day. And originally I was going to just do available lighting, handheld, and then Chris Callan, our amazing DP, really pushed against that and really wanted to try to craft images that were better up to his standard, because my standard was a lot lower, and the film was better for it. But it also made we just had less time to get through the scenes in any given day, which is sort of the standard, indie film gripe. But to really, I think, do the improv, to really explore that, you really have to just focus on like one page or one scene all day. And you really have to take time with your actors and just explore in a rehearsal period, and then get the cameras up and sort of be a lot more fluid. And it was just clear that, like, if I had an hour to shoot a scene, I couldn't just, okay, well, let's explore this improv style. It was just going to add a lot of stress, and we weren't really going to get there. So I definitely encouraged it, and actors were free to sort of adjust lines on the fly, but everything stayed a lot more close to the script than I originally thought and even wanted. But, where were points where if lines still bothered me, it's like I never quite got it right on the page and I wasn't worried about it, we would kind of workshop it. I was like, all right, give me 5 different versions of that, but like in your own words. And we did that a lot, so that at the edit I can really kind of pick. And I also know that like I tend to overwrite in the script, knowing that I can kind of edit in the edit. So like I was already watching one conversation scene, them doing the lines as scripted, doing little variations. And I was like, okay, cool. I was like, I can cut 30% of this in the edit. It's just not needed. And not until you really hear it out loud does that come clear. So the good thing is I got everything I needed from each scene. And if lines were still clunky, where it's like an actor never quite got it, like this line never felt quite natural in their mouth, that's usually a reflection on the writing. Mm-hmm. Because, if the writing was real, then the actors could say it. It sounded real. So we would nitpick, and I would try not to move on until I at least got versions of those lines that felt honest, so that I can build it in the edit. But yeah, it was a huge learning experience, for someone who really wanted to make something that was much more improvisational. I was like, oh, I needed to plan and approach this differently than we were able to, if I really wanted to do that. And it was like the whole goal was a smaller crew as possible. And so we didn't have a script supervisor. We didn't even have a first AD. And the reason we didn't have a first AD is because I often can function like that in my own shoots. I've done the AD job for other projects, So I'm really good at organization, keeping to the schedule, knowing, all right, here's what we got to get through to make our day. And so I was my own first AD. But very quickly, I was like, you know what? I don't want to do this again. I'm suffering because I'm doing both jobs. We made our days. I made every single day, but my creative brain was always in tension with my AD brain. And one day we had a heavier day where our good friend Michelle, who's an executive producer on the project, she kind of came and AD'd for me. And I just didn't have to think about the schedule. I was only talking to Chris about shots, and she was kind of keeping the train moving. And it was just a stress-free day for me. And I realized, like, just because I can AD myself doesn't mean I should. And, it was a good takeaway. I don't want to make a film this small again. I said that after Fair. It's like you go 5 years without directing something. You kind of do whatever it takes. But stuff like that, I'm paying a price for ADing my own thing where my brain is constantly compromised and not able to just be creative.
Yeah. I mean, despite still falling in the ultra low budget category for SAG, this is still 10 times the scale of Fair.
100%. And like Fair, we made in a week with everyone got deferred pay. So this is obviously, it was Fair was a 3-day shoot and a few days of rehearsal. This was like, people are signing on to basically a 12-day shoot and everyone's getting paid. And it's a much more, and Fair was non-SAG, and it was just kind of like the four of us crew, like me, you, RC, and Jeff, and Dave Snidecki in a car. I mean, it was a whole different. It wasn't just a smaller film; it was an entirely different film, and you can only kind of make that kind of film once because there was the newness of it. We were able to call in favors. We were able to get those cast and crew to work deferred, and I don't know that I could do that again. Or certainly, I was at to this point where I didn't want to do that again. Like I wanted to raise money and take a weekly draw for myself that was on par with all the other cast and crew. So I was like, I'm not gonna ask them to work deferred or for free if I don't want to do that. So that was big part of the raise was like, we're all gonna make basically the same amount a day. So yeah, Fair was just this amazing, unreplicatable sort of little moment. Both in what we made and also how we made it. And it felt special because of that. The prep of this was much harder. Like the prep was hard because it was just like, I was carrying so much. The stakes felt so high. I was just real stressed out. I was afraid it would all fall apart. The shooting has been beautiful and it's been fairly low stress, all things considered. And it's been a joy and a dream, the 2 weeks of shooting we've had, but I'm excited to cut this together and sell it, but you're already like, when can I make a film where I don't even know how the production side came together? Where I don't know how the crew got assembled. I don't know how the locations got secured. I don't even know, what our insurance policy looks like, where I'm just a writer and director. That's the dream. That's the more I produce, the more I realize I don't want to produce anymore. I just want to be able to, make something or be hired, to make something else because, it's taxing. We've talked about tolls and it's like you're paying tolls.
Yeah. One day you might look back with nostalgia.
Oh, that's true. And it's like, you kind of laugh because, if I had a $20 million film that somebody else was financing and I was just the director, it has its own stresses and its own issues. Like there's no perfect sort of environment. And in some ways I could look back and it might not be as good as this. Like this is almost, this could be as good as it gets, which is kind of part of the theme of the film. Like just be content with where you are and don't keep looking down at some finish line that you keep kicking further down the road every time you come up against it.
Yeah.
So it's been making this film has been a constant reminder of the film sort of theme and message of, content.
So this film is just a diary entry to yourself.
As they all are.
It is a message on the mirror to Thomas Torrey.
as yes, I mean, as I think, it's inevitable when you kind
As every great film is. Every great film throughout history is a message to Thomas Torrey.
of exactly.
Yeah, I'm excited. I feel like, with this sort of thing, it's I guess it's valuable to talk about the partnerships and just being honest. And I feel like, I've got to say, when you first came to me with this, in all honesty, I was really nervous and skeptical about the project, and just, full, I don't want to be like, Johnny come lately, as though I've been on board this whole time. And I remember having like, I actually wrote, I fully wrote out an email to you and then decided not to send it. And instead I was like, I feel like this should be a phone call. Do you remember that? I mean, obviously you never saw
Was it after you read the draft?
Yeah, after I read the draft.
Script?
Yeah. And so I wrote out an email with everything that we talked about on that phone, that like 2-hour phone call. I wrote that email out and then was like, shit, I don't want to send this. This feels like, it just felt really cold and distant. And I felt like, because there were things in there that I was like, I was skeptical about, and I was nervous. And I feel like I have to admit the fact that I didn't see the vision, and I'm proud of you for sticking with it and pushing through, because, although I'm not like your creative cheerleader, that's not my job. I'm a business partner, but I feel like, I should be up there pretty high, like, not far down the list after Amanda. And I was afraid that what I was saying was discouraging to you. But, I was just trying to give my opinion, but walking that line of like saying, hey, like, I am nervous that this might be another fair, but like just cost more money. And so it is in so many ways defying my fears and expectations. And I just think you should take some pride in the fact that you were able to push through that, and execute on the vision. I think, in a really impressive way. So,
thank you. When did it shift for you? Was it seeing the dailies where it was sort of like, oh, I'm seeing now what he's after, like sort of that visual representation, or was it before that where your own sort of confidence in the project started to shift?
I mean, I never really had any additional, I felt like you heard my feedback and I trusted you enough to know what you were doing. So, the fact that you're moving forward, that kind of increased my confidence in it. But then, yeah, seeing the dailies, that was when it flipped the whole thing for me. I mean, Chris did such a good job making it look beautiful. And again, I mean, seeing the actors, kind of the natural rapport that they had. And I mean, even the scene with like the big family scene, it just felt like
Thanksgiving.
I mean, it felt, voyeuristic in a happy way. Like, I mean, me, like I am not a Christmas guy. I don't
Right.
like Christmas music. Like Christmas always kind of bums me out a little bit. And I mostly just do it for my family because I know that my wife is like number one Christmas fan forever. And I want my kids to grow up enjoying Christmas. But like for me, it's always a little bit of a kind of a sad time of year. And like seeing that family was like, that's what I've always wanted. And that's, I feel like what I'm building with my family.
Wow.
Is like, I'll never have the chance to be the kid in that family again. Like the cute kids kind of running around having a good time, but at least I can be, the parent, the grandparent who's like facilitating these family things. And it was like just beautiful and, but also not in the sort of like the way that I feel like a lot of holiday films are. Like, I mean, even you think about Home Alone 2, right? That scene in the Waldorf Astoria, right? Where it's like, that will never be my family in that like 2-story hotel room, right? It's just like opulent. And like so many Christmas movies, they want to be big and beautiful. And so they do these opulent Christmas things, but that just felt like, okay, that could be my house that they're in.
Mm-hmm.
That could be, my sister-in-law's house or whatever. So it just felt really like homey and family and,
Well, that it means a lot because getting back to your feedback, and you followed you're right. You trusted your gut not sending me the email, because the phone call was hard enough of just getting the feedback. And it was kind, and it was constructive. But and there was some compliments, but there was also some criticisms, and it's never easy getting any level of criticism. I mean, it's like you think you'd have written enough stuff and it gotten critiqued. It's never easy hearing that. And it was like a 1-2 punch of getting some additional criticism from another guy who read it, who had no real criticisms about the script, just kind of a lack of confidence that I would capture the magic that I needed to. He's like, this only works if you capture magic. Like, so your lead's got to be magical. The music's got to be magical. And it was just like, he didn't say it, but all I was hearing from him was like, I don't have confidence this is going to happen. And it was so discouraging. And then your feedback on the script was necessarily things that like, okay, this is how it's hitting you. And I knew as you were saying it, all right, this is all good stuff. And I've got to reckon with it. And it really informed rewrites where I was able to improve, hopefully, all of the things that you were bumping up against. But it was all in this one night where I was really having to like trust the idea and the tone. I mean, what you're talking about, there's an idea of a musician chasing the dream set at Christmas. Going back to our discussion of tone, how a director handles that tone is the difference between it being something we all love and something that we all roll our eyes about.
Right.
And the dailies, you sort of saw, oh, here's the tone. It's real. It's raw. It's lived in. It's not Hallmarky. It's normal people. It's normal. It has this very lived in quality that I was always hoping for and always trying to achieve, but it was the first sort of evidence that I'm capturing it. And part of it's the music. Oh, these songs are really great. And the way he's performing is really great. And then these visuals are really strong. You want it all to come together in a story that works. And there's even something about Christmas. So the whole Christmas setting, and I talk to people and they're like, oh, it's really smart. And I appreciate that, but it's like, I'm not trying to make a Christmas movie because it's smart or, economically smart, financially smart. Like, it really came from this video that I saw years ago of Bono and Glenn Hansard singing Christmas carols in the streets of Dublin. Something they do like every year. It's become sort of a tradition where these superstars go out in Dublin and they just start singing classic Christmas carols, which are hymns. I mean, Christmas is a traditionally Christian holiday, so the old ancient public domain songs, they're all essentially Christian hymns about the birth of Christ. Now, hopefully it's culturally relevant enough so it's not just going to be a film for Christians who celebrate it, but in America, the holidays kind of become overrun with just sort of this new cultural and over-marketed sort of holiday that I think we all sort of, part of us, we like embracing the tradition, but it all feels like a lot. And when I saw this viral video of Bono and Glenn Hansard and like 100 drunken Irish people singing these ancient Christmas songs, there was a purity, there was a holiness, there was a simplicity to it that inspired me and made me love Christmas in a way that I hadn't in a long time. Or maybe it was nostalgia for the time of my youth, but Christmas now is it's just TV ads and Santa and presents. And so I was like, man, I want to capture the spirit of what I'm feeling in this viral video in this film. So that was sort of why Christmas and why music. And the big climax of the film is a bunch of drunken people singing in a pub. And so my hope was that if I can sort of thread that needle, it will be meaningful to people who have, Christian or not, who have any sort of cultural or family sort of inclination towards the holiday, because it will feel so different than 99% of Christmas film and television. And hopefully it won't be cynical or sentimental. for most of us who sort of feel over, over the holidays, at least in terms of how it's sort of marketed.
Obviously, I haven't seen, how you sort of stick the landing on this film, but for me, one of the things that always bothers me about Christmas films, specifically Christmas content, I should say, is just how like saccharine it is. And it's like, there's always, in any given one, there's always a, and I'm doing this in air quotes, dark night of the soul moment, right? Whether it's like the bakery is going to go out of business and like, Jamie's got to save her bakery, or like whatever it is, there's always something like that. But it always ends up so unrealistically happy that it's like, that is not a life that I have ever existed in. Like, where at the end of the day, families gathered round and it's like, we've all achieved our goals and we saved the bakery and it's more successful than ever. And it's like, no, reality would have been that like, you save the bakery, but you do lose your storefront and you have to become like an online business to compete. And it's like, you're still doing it, but it's still fucking hard. And you are either happy or not about it. And that is, and that's one of the things that I do feel like that I did like about the script was the fact that it did not go for, and in the end he makes it, and in the end he is, right. He becomes John Mark McMillan or whatever. It's just,
right.
It's a little bit more honest.
And I'm very aware that we're in a subgenre, like A Star Is Born, about the musician chasing the dream. And we actually tiptoed towards that conventional route in order to sort of subvert it. And you realize, and Charlie's character, the manager, says it. He even says it out loud. He's like, this isn't the story where the manager discovers you and you make it big. And so it's not about him achieving a success that he feels entitled to. It's about him coming to terms with the definition of that success to begin with. And it ends and that's why kind of like the big climax is like where he's playing at his pub where he works to the people there, that fills the room. And I think the achievement of his character is that that is enough. Like he's actually, this can be the dream if I'm okay with it. Not to give away sort of the ending, but
it might seem cynical, but I feel like it is kind of truth. And maybe we've talked about this, or maybe I've even said this exactly before, but like that it turns out that the key to happiness is not any achievement or any, belonging or any relationship. It's redefining what you believe happiness is, right?
Yeah.
And it's like that. If you can do that, you can be happy. But short of that, nothing will ever make you happy.
Yeah.
Because you will always sort of, like you said earlier, you're going to keep moving that goalpost, and you'll just never get there. And so, yeah, I think that's something that is needed in, it's in this genre specifically, or especially, but in general, I think there are things like Ted Lasso, right, where like that level of optimism is kind of like enjoyable. But I also feel like, given the circumstances of the world right now, I also appreciate a bit of like realism. It like, I don't want to just be told like everything's going to be great and all this stuff, because it doesn't feel true or real. And so, I want a little bit more, leaning towards like the darkness of of reality, as opposed to sort of the bright candy coated whatever that we're always being fed.
And it's, it's about a guy arriving at that measure of peace. And it's sort of a series of conversations he has with the people who influence him, his wife, his cousin, this manager, and then this kind of industry veteran. It's sort of, they each kind of build upon each other. And always kind of coming back to the central relationship with his wife. And so a story is that simple, and kind of the change we see in the character is really told through the music. And so the performances, like lyrically, the songs are all relevant. And in fact, we wrote a couple originals, and we really, really wrote a pure original for the film that becomes very much the theme song for the film, where he actually takes what he's learned and he writes an additional new final chorus to the song that very much invokes some of the things that he's heard other people say. So in a good musical fashion, it's not a traditional musical, but it is in some ways, where the characters are performing music live on camera and the songs are actually part of the engine of the story.
And, as somebody who is also a musician, I mean, how did it feel being kind of back, like kind of steeped in music in a way that, at least as far as I know, like you haven't really been in quite a while.
Yeah, it's been such a joy. And I think, so my love for music, my own dabbling in music, I've written, I've recorded, I've performed, I've had bands. It's always been a deep love. It's never been a full pursuit. So that love drew me to the story and gave me enough to know that I need to fill this with authentic musicians, not just in front of the camera like Stephen and John Mark, but I need a music producer who can really shepherd the music in a real way, because I know my own limits there. So Kevin Daly's been our music producer, who's also our composer, and he's been incredible. He's been so validating. He's really had the vision of where the songs need to go, and then actually how to capture them, how to produce them, how to mix them. And it's been so fun. As a writer, there were a couple songs that I wrote that I wanted in the film, but I didn't want to assume that they were as good as I thought they were. And they were both unwritten. They were unfinished. And so Kevin was the first sort of litmus test of like, hey, do these songs work? This one song that I started years ago, it thematically, it's about letting the dream go, and it feels so right for this, but you tell me. And he's been really honest, and he really was like, I think this is an amazing start. Like this, he's like, yeah, I think this is great, and we can flesh this out. So we had a songwriters weekend early and kicked it off. Me, Kevin, John Mark, Stephen, and my brother, Ruben, who's an amazing songwriter, who's also contributed a couple of his own originals to the soundtrack. We took the two songs that I had started that I wanted to be original to the film, and as a group, we finished writing them. And it was a rich, creative time. We had a whiteboard, and we had John Mark is one of the best songwriters I know. Kevin's one of the best producers I know. Steven's one of the best singers. My brother's one of the best poets. And I just sort of like sat back and let these pros kind of recraft the song. And I was there to provide guidance of like, this is still important to me. What about this? But all of them were like, I can't believe how much you let us kind of like, rewrite your song. And I was like, hey, I was like, I know where I know my own strengths in film and the things I want to control. And I know enough to know it's like, I got to start it with a good song. And as a group, we can finish it. And there's still, and it's, it's definitely, it still feels like mine, but it's also very much the group's, these couple originals that we wrote. So that was fun. And that required very, very little creative dying. Yeah. It required very little kind of creative death on my part, because it just, these guys are like changing lines, changing things, just was objectively better of just new levels that this song could open up.
Yeah. That sounds amazing.
That's been just so fun. And then watching it come together on the day, like, bro, Heavy Hope. So the first time we heard Heavy Hope was that song he's singing to the baby, and then he and the wife sort of sing the final chorus. The sound guy starts crying, like eyes welling up with tears, just hearing the words, because they feel so real and so honest. And he's like affected. Like after the take, he looks at me, he's just like, bro, I'm emotional. Like it was just real and rich and honest. Another guy, the DIT guy, is like, after the second song, he's like, I don't like musicals. He's like, I love this. Like, I want to see this movie. And it was just, I was constantly hearing stories of like just crew people just in real time realizing that they're part of something special by their own words. Like, this is awesome. I didn't realize what this was. And it was so validating because it's like you want to make something where the music touches the sound guy in the audience, that's not just.
Yeah.
Like...
I mean, like I said before, me, I hate everything.
Right.
And I had to pause the a video that you sent me because I was so emotional about it. I had to pause it, and then I had Rebecca was like, "What are you doing?" So then I had to show her. So I paused it, restarted it, and showed her, and then we're having the kids are like, "What are you watching? What are you watching?" I'm like, "Get out of here! We're trying to have an emotional moment."
No. That's awesome.
And you know who I want to meet? You know who I really want to meet? I want to meet Ruben. How is it that I've never met Ruben?
Are you sure?
I feel like I know him. I'm positive.
Wow.
Because I have to think about it every time. I'm like, I've never met him.
That's weird. That feels weird. Yeah.
Because I've met your sister, Joanna.
Mm-hmm.
But Ruben, it's like we've always been ships in the night. We've never met, but he just, I feel like I know him because I hear about him so much because you just won't shut up about him.
It was special because, he lives up in Connecticut and we don't see each other. We're close. We keep in touch, but we don't see each other a ton. And when I started the project, I've always loved his music. And he's an English teacher, teaches high school, but he's always been a poet at heart, and he's always written poetry and also written amazing folk songs. And growing up, I was the actor, film guy. He was the musician. And when I did this, I was like, bro, I want to use a couple of your songs in this soundtrack and really, introduce your songwriting to the world in a way that you haven't, that hasn't been already. And he was very gracious to allow me to use 2 songs in particular. And then when I did this writing retreat, I was like, I want to fly you in and go up to this mountain retreat. Selfishly, I was like, I just want to spend time with you, and it's just a way to, on the film's dime, bring him in. But he's a real collaborator and songwriter, and it was awesome. And he really, Heavy Hope, kind of the main song. I wrote the first chorus and then gave it over to him, and he kind of wrote a whole pass of the song and really introduced what would become the verse structure, introduced what would become the bridge, and wrote everyone's favorite line was Ruben's. Ruben, in the final version of the song, I don't know, we all the amount of actual lyrics are pretty well divided between the group of us. Some of my original ones still there, some of John Mark's, Kevin's. Everyone kind of contributed something special. But Ruben's hand is still very much in that song, and validating his, sort of his value in that writing workshop. But even a couple of the songs that Steven's character are going to sing as Gabe originals, the character, are Ruben originals. Well,
that's cool.
And that's been a lot of fun. And Rube was very apprehensive at first of how much we would kind of reimagine his songs. But because Steven needs to perform them in a way that feels organic to him.
Right.
And but at the same time, we don't want to completely rewrite them. So that's been a little bit of a process. But what Steven and Kevin have already been rehearsing and demoing the songs. And I've been sharing with my brother, and we're all just so excited. And the song, the film opens with a Christmas carol because the character's performing it at a mall. But then he goes to a bar and he kind of plays this sort of White Stripes blues style, original song, just him and a drummer. And it's gonna shred. It's gonna hit so hard. And that's a Ruben Torrey original, called Poor Boy Legacy. And I'm so excited about that because it's a fun song. Steven's gonna crush it in the performance, but also lyrically, it speaks to the story. That's why I kind of picked it. So the soundtrack, there's only 2 songs written for the film that will be on the soundtrack, but it'll be 15 tracks, and most of them will feel like originals because there's stuff that hasn't really been introduced to the world. There's a lot of soulful covers of Christmas carols, and then a few previously released songs by Steven, John Mark, by another guy named Drake, by a woman named Sarah DeShields that will appear on the soundtrack that have already been out in the world, but they'll be, the live versions will be on our soundtrack. So there'll be kind of new interpretations of them. So if the film fails to sell by any reason, I don't think it will, but if it does, there's a big upside in the soundtrack exploitation, which is a nice risk mitigator.
Yeah, I'm pretty pumped, man. I think I said when I texted you that that it brought me to tears, but also just it was seeing it, just it kind of it made me sad that I wasn't more involved, just because it just seems like it's just such a fun, beautiful project. Coming up, 2 picks. Thomas dumps on one of them.
Well, in my fairness, that wasn't your pick.
Was it?
I didn't actually dump on your pick. Did you pick it?
Maybe not. Thomas just dumps on something.
You got a 2 pick?
Is that a thing that we do?
I gotta think of something.
God, I've read a ton of books, watched some shows. As an author, I think I've talked about multiple times on here, Naomi Novik. She wrote a really great. It's a trilogy. 2 of them have come out. The first one is called A Deadly Education, and I don't know how to describe it other than like, what if Harry Potter were, or imagine Harry Potter in a world where the stakes were higher. Magic actually had costs. There were costs to doing magic. And it was more honest about what high school is like, just in the sort of cutthroat, terrible, knockdown, drag out, world of Harry Potter. She kind of reimagines her whole magic system. I think is much better. But it's a very dark, it's not a book for kids. I mean, the kids go into the school and it has a 25% survival rate. But it's a lot of fun. The first and second book are both really good. Deadly Education, Naomi Novik. That's kind of the first one that came to mind. Just because I forgot to prepare. A Boy Called Christmas, kids movie. That's my real staple. Have you seen that?
I did.
What'd you think?
I didn't like it.
Oh, all right. What didn't you like about it?
I didn't dislike it. It just wasn't grabbing me. Because now I'm trying to defend what I didn't like about it, and I just can't remember. Like it was just sort of like, it didn't really leave a stamp, and I've kind of forgotten about it. There was a lot I liked about it. I liked its tone. I liked its production value. I'm a little averse to what seems like a new trend of Christmas movie, which is like all these origin stories, these mythological origin stories, which a new writer just makes up. Like there's not actually, like, the tradition of Christmas, everyone sort of knows. There's the Christ story, the nativity story, and then there's the Saint Nicholas story. And each of those are sort of a known kind of mythology. And so new movies, what's become in vogue is this idea of like, coming up with some new origin story. And to the point, like the Christmas Chronicles 2, you have to watch, because it's the most bananas, ridiculous movie I've ever seen, where this is true. This should be a meme, but it's actually part of the movie. Saint Nicholas was a bishop who was able to harness the power of the Star of Bethlehem in order to create a dome over the North Pole that would power Santa's workshop. So that's that. And you're just like, this is the most. That's true, as in, like, that's actually what happened. That's the real story of Christmas. Exactly.
So what happened in the movie then?
Yeah. Kurt Russell hams it up as Santa.
Kurt Russell is Jesus, I think.
So A Boy Called Christmas, it scratched that pain of just like, these new Christmas origin stories. I'm over. Add to that the fantasy element, which I've always said, like, a fantasy movie has got to be really good for me to overcome my own sort of prejudice and bias against the genre. And so it didn't overcome either of those things. So it wasn't like it was a fender because there was a lot to like about it. But since it didn't overcome these sort of predispositions of prejudice against the very premise of the film, it ended up being kind of like, I mean, my kids and my family enjoyed it, and it was a lot better than a lot of other things. But I think that's, now that I'm verbally processing it with you, I think that's sort of why I kind of checked out of the film halfway through.
All right. And so next time we record, Thomas will dump on a different kid's movie.
Just saw Spider-Man No Way Home yesterday with the family. It's fun. There's a lot to like about it. It's
that fun was very italicized.
Fun. Well, it's got like a 94% on the tomato meter. I'm like, I think critics have started weighting Marvel movies differently than they used to. Like the whole MCU has invaded the culture where now they all get sort of universally sort of improved and upgraded, because it was a good movie, but it wasn't like The Homecoming was a fantastic film. Spider-Man Homecoming, the first one with Tom Holland, with Michael Keaton. Fantastic.
Oh yeah, that one was
the
good.
Two sequels are both fine, but neither of them have lived up to that. And frankly, this one, the plot is very kind of silly and very sort of like, all right, well, here's a plot we just constructed in order to create the paradigm that would allow the film to do what it does, which is basically open the multiverse to all these other characters from the other Spider-Man franchises. So it's fun. It's fan service. It's great. I'd see it again, but it's not elevating the MCU like some other Marvel movies have.
Okay.
So that's not a pick,
your pick
though. What is my pick?
Is to not watch Spider-Man or Christmas Chronicles, or so I feel like your pick is just to skip Christmas.
So
Christmas with the Cranks.
I mean, I've probably had Succession as a pick. I haven't yet finished. I'm still 2 episodes behind the finale because all the crew, the finale happened while we were shooting, so people were talking about it. I was like, I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. Succession, though, is a beautiful show. I don't know. I think my pick has been the fact that I wanted to, like, this is my first film of length that I've directed. So Fair we made, but we made very quickly. Then we made Premise, which we were up in New York for 6 weeks, but we didn't direct that. So I had a very different relationship to that project. So as a director, once we passed the 4-day mark, I was like, this is the longest project I've ever directed. and the first week, your brain is filled and stretched thin. You don't sleep at all. It was amazing to find the rhythm of week 2, where I was going into shoot days that were more aggressive than anything in week 1, but you kind of find your rhythm, and I was able to sleep. Add to that I went home every day. It's like I saw my family each evening and each morning, which is always kind of the dream. Like I remember Tarantino talking about shooting Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which, he shot for months, and he lives in LA. So he shot there, and he talked about like going home at the end of the day and having dinner with his wife and his newborn and like watching TV. And it was I was like, I can't even comprehend a rhythm of principal photography where you can just go home and kind of have a normal life and get up and go to work. Now, a project like that, you're working hopefully less hours. It's spread over a lot more time. So it kind of falls into the normal rhythm of daily life. But I actually got to taste that a little bit on this project, because by week 2, we had settled in as a crew. We knew what each day, was ahead, and I got to go home. Now, even though I was working much longer, 12 and 14-hour days, there's like on weekends and even some evenings, I kind of got to check out and just watch a show with my kids, or get up and have breakfast and just have an hour where my boys would ask me about the previous day and I would tell them all about it. And it was a nice little, an indicator of like, oh, I want this, as much as I can have it on a production. And, it was really sweet, and it made me excited to hopefully, like, if I'm going to shoot something big, if I can do it home, close to home, or, if you're going off and moving somewhere for a year, you bring the family with you. But, anyway, that was that was kind of a sweet thing that really, I think, helped, because, the family is used to me kind of being all consumed during production. and even the few times I've gone away. So they were just grateful to have me there, and they were very respectful of, like I wasn't able to bear a lot of the family burden like I usually do. So Amanda has to really go much more than she should on days on production shoots. So credit to her for doing that, and credit to my kids for just, giving me the grace to kind of be there, but not there for 2 weeks. But even when I was there, it's still, we all felt it, and it just made it a little easier. So I was appreciative of that.
That's awesome.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Rate, review us, subscribe us wherever you get your podcasts. And if the algorithm sort of kicked us out of your feed because we've been silent for 2 months, then you can write a letter to Mr. Mark Zuckerberg and Meta and Instagram and all the other companies that he owns and just say, hey, I don't need your algorithm telling me how to live my life. You can find us at twofriendswithapodcast.com.
Unfollow us on Instagram and Facebook. Quit those. Unsubscribe from them. Follow us on Pinterest.
LinkedIn.
You can also follow us at LinkedIn and Peloton. Thomas and I are both instructors, Peloton instructors.
And twofriendswithapodcast.com is where we'll see any notes for this episode. There won't be none because we're just talking about the film. So, this outro is getting really irrelevant.
Well, you could link.
I could link a rough cut of my film.
Well, no, I was thinking the one that you can get to from BTP's website, but they can't get there without the password. Which is...
No. That's a private thing for investors.
Okay, well, just be quiet so I can say the password.
That's all for now. I gotta go. I gotta sell a Jeep to a dude. Thanks for listening.
Bye, love you.
Okay, bye.
So wait a minute, hold on. We're going to spend a full 2 hours talking about Thomas? That's unprecedented.
I know. I normally stay in the shadows. I don't say too much. And it's really hard for me to speak, especially about myself. But, new year, new me.
That's the kind of interviewer that I am. I'm able to bring Thomas Story out of his shell for 2 solid hours.